So we're in the fourth chapter of Bava Metzia, and we are really into where we called it. You could call it overcharging or fraud or abuse, and actually we're using the term price gouging really through this chapter. We're into financial abuse. We'll see in a couple of Mishnayot that in fact we're into other kinds of abuse as well. But then in the seventh and eighth Mishnah of the chapter, the Mishnah goes off into a different direction and it starts playing number games with, well, we'll see, with pennies. And the commentators all say, by the way, that, oh yeah, these number games are completely disassociated from the material of the rest of the chapter. But, and maybe that's true, certainly one of the issues it's dealt with here is betrothal, and that is certainly disassociated. But we'll see as we go through these number games in the upcoming two Mishnayot that there is some kind of connection with fraud and abuse. We are still broadly in the territory of fraud and abuse. So even though the Mishnah overtly seems to be going off in a different direction, in its subconscious, so to speak, in the subconscious of the Mishnah, we can see that the whole question about financial abuse is still in its mind. So with that in our minds, let's just try to jump up. Let's try to jump it. Price gouging is 4 pieces of silver. That means, and we've learned this before, we're talking about 4 pieces of silver in a coin worth 24, in other words, 1/6. We've always said that if an item is mispriced by 1/6, so that's 4 in 24, if it's mispriced by 1/6, then the transaction is null and void. It can be reversed. It can be basically, either it can be reversed or the price can be adjusted at the option of the buyer. So hona'a arba'a kesef. Price gouging is 4 pieces of silver. Ve'atana shnei chesef, and a claim is 2 pieces of silver. Let's just hold on to that for a second. Ve'hodaya shavei pruta, and an admission of liability is a pruta. In other words, and where I'm unpacking this Mishnah essentially along the lines of Maimonides, that if you admit a part of a claim, if someone makes a claim on you and you admit a part of it, then you still have to, but you deny the rest. You can be asked to take an oath to swear the validity of your statement of what you've denied. So what you deny, you have to take an oath. But of course, taking an oath is a serious business. And you wouldn't take an oath for a non-serious amount of money. And the Mishnah seems to be saying that if the denial has to be at least a pruta. If you deny at least a pruta, that is a minimal quantity of money. Let's call it a cent. If you deny a pruta in a claim, and if you admit a pruta in a claim, if you admit to a pruta, but you then deny the rest of the claim, and the rest of the claim is at least 2 pieces of silver, at that point, the Bet Din will make you swear an oath. So the admission is a cent, the denial is minimally 2 pieces of silver. And from this idea that the denial, it has to be at least a cent's worth. Sorry, the admission has to be at least a cent's worth. We're going to talk about other examples of the pruta of the 1 cent. So, chamesh prutotem, there are 5 prutas. In other words, there are 5 situations where we talk about a cent. Hahoda'ah shavei pruta. So the admission of liability is a pruta. We've dealt with that. A woman can be betrothed with something worth a pruta. Well, we've learned that in Kiddushin. We'll learn this later in the Mishnah. Someone who benefits a pruta's worth of hekdesh, of property dedicated to the temple, has ma'al, has committed sacrilege. In other words, they have to bring that they have to bring a compensatory sacrifice because they've trampled on, they've taken temple property. How much temple property? A cent's worth, a minimal quantity. Someone who finds something worth a pruta has to proclaim it, has to say, I found a lost object. We've learned this already in the previous chapter. Someone who steals something worth a pruta from his fellow, and then steal something worth a pruta from his fellow, and then swears to him. This is, by the way, an untrue oath. So he makes this untrue oath that he hasn't stolen it. So he's wronged him twice over. He has to follow him even as far as Persia, even as far as Media, as far as Iran. He's got to go as far as Iran to give the object back. The minimal quantity for going to Iran to give back the stolen object is a pruta. It's a cent. In other words, well, I guess it's an indication as to how the rabbis feel about the combination of theft and a false oath, that the actor is punished right to the extreme degree. And just as there are 5 prutas, there are 5 fifths. Hamisha hamishim, there are 5 fifths. So you can see now why the commentators say, oh yeah, the Mishnah's just gone off on a tangent. It's playing number games with 5s. Not only are there 5 prutas, but there are 5 fifths. But again, we'll see again the connection with fraud and abuse. And what are we talking about with a fifth? Well, this is the kind of the Mishnaic fifth, which is actually 25%. It's a quarter. But there are certain situations where if you make restitution, you have to add a fifth. So rather than giving back 100%, you give back 125%. The Mishnaic fifth is a quarter, it's 25%. And when you give back the 125%, of course, that last 25% is a fifth of everything that you've given back. That's why, from the point of view of the Mishnah, we still call it a fifth, even though in today's terminology, we would probably call it a quarter. Anyway, there are 5 situations where we would give back an extra fifth, and here they are. Ochel truma, someone who eats truma. If you consume truma, this is assuming you're not a kohen, right? So this is not your truma. You eat truma, which is due to a kohen. Ochel truma, utrumat maser, or truma taken from the tithe. Utrumat maser shel damai, or truma from a tithe taken from doubtfully tithed produce. If you buy produce from basically someone who's not from, then you have to tithe it because you assume he doesn't. V'hachala, or chala, you eat chala. V'habikurim, or first fruits. In all of these situations, mosifim chomesh, you add a fifth. So that's the first situation where you have to add a fifth. Apodeh neta revi'i, maaser sheni shelo mosif chomesh. Someone who apodeh neta revi'i, someone who redeems a 4th year plant. Now, we know that for the first 3 years, a new tree the fruit of a new tree is orla. It can't be eaten. Orla means kind of uncircumcised. Essentially, when you plant a tree, for the first 3 years, you don't harvest it. You have to just let it grow. The 4th year, the fruit becomes a bit like second tithe. You take it and you eat it in Jerusalem. It's like Thanksgiving that this tree has now nearly got to the point of bit of maturity. So the neta revi'i is the 4th year fruit that you would normally take to Jerusalem. And of course, if it's heavy, right? If it's heavy, you can't take it to Jerusalem. So you'll redeem it for money. You'll take the money and you'll spend that in Jerusalem. And that is hapodeh neta revi'i, someone who redeems 4th year plant, i.e. fruit from the 4th year of the tree that should go to Jerusalem. Maaser sheni shelo, or his second tithe. It's the same thing. If it's too heavy to take to Jerusalem, you convert it to money. And in all of these situations, mosif chomesh, you add a fifth. Hapodeh hekdesh shor mosif chomesh. Someone who redeems hekdesh, someone who redeems something that was dedicated to the temple, they are going to add a fifth, mosif chomesh. Ve'aneneh shoveh prutza mina hekdesh. Someone who derives a pruta's worth of benefit from hekdesh. So maybe you eat some of it, or maybe you use some of it in some reason. I guess if you rented it out, perhaps. Mosif chomesh, you add a fifth. Someone who steals the value of a putter from his fellow and swears to him. Again, this is the false swearing. Now, we already know that he has to travel all the way to Iran to give back the object. But in addition to that, mosif chomesh, he has to add on a fifth. If you steal and lie, you've got to add on a fifth.